Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
Hi, this is Ilona Thompson with Palate Exposure. I'm here on a very bright sunny day on Howell Mountain, spectacular views and company. I'm here with Brakesman and Heather Griffin, their brother and sister team, co-proprietors of Lake Vineyards. I had a chance to walk a vineyard with them this morning, and they have some old vines that really touched my heart, and we're going to talk all about it. There's quite a bit of history here. I understand that your dad was the one that acquired the property and started planting in the 70s?
That is correct.
Yeah, so tell us about it.
So my dad graduated with a degree in engineering in late 1970, and during his senior year of college, started exploring wines. And he and my mom were living on a horse boarding ranch down in San Jose that butted up against some old vineyards down there, some Zinfandel vines, and he got to know the gentleman that owned the property, and my dad took it upon himself to confiscate a garbage can full of grapes, made his first batch of wine in a garbage can in his kitchen in San Jose, and fell in love with the process, and decided to start looking for prime valley floor property. Wow. And so at the time he was helping a friend of ours build a house out at Point Reyes Station on the coast.
Very beautiful.
But he would take the long way through the valley, and built a relationship with a real estate agent here. And the guy called him one day and said, so I've got a piece of property up in Angwin that's got some old pre-prohibition vines on it. And my dad said, well,
where's Angwin?
Where's Angwin?
Even to today, people ask, where's Angwin?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Familiar with Howell Mountain, but not the town of Angwin.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty remote.
It is. Yeah, it feels like a different world.
And
still.
it's in Napa Valley, which is world famous, of course, viticultural region, and you're not that far off Silverado Trail. Like, people drive up and down a lot when they come here to visit, but it's a whole other world.
It is definitely a whole other world. Yeah, so
and
he...
back in 71, I can only imagine, before we were born.
It was a little more remote in the early 70s, but... Yeah, so he met the real estate guy and came up here and walked the property with this guy, figured out that the whole property had really been abandoned for many years.
Really?
The vines that the gentleman had spoken of were completely overgrown and untended for 30 to 40 years. And there were people that lived in the house that weren't really supposed to be on the property, but they were here. But I think he saw the potential,
of course,
and ended up purchasing the property.
This house is from 1897, I understand, which is remarkable. It's a piece of history.
Yeah.
The original gentleman that farmed was an Italian gentleman, Mario Ferrazzi.
Yeah.
So he built this house. He made wine in the basement. There's a pretty substantial basement, about 1/3 the size of the house, and footprint underneath.
Amazing.
Where Dad actually started making the wines.
I was going to say, he probably picked right up.
Picked it right up and started crushing grapes on the back pad and pump them down through that small little door to get them underneath the house.
There's your gravity flow facility right there.
Exactly. One of the original.
As authentic as it gets.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So you grew up watching your dad tend to the vineyards and make wine. What was that like?
I think for me, looking back, it's remarkable now.
Yeah.
Growing up in it, you don't know any different.
Sure.
That's what everybody's parents did in the valley.
Yeah.
Everybody either had vineyards or they had wineries, or, everybody had wine at the dinner table, and it was very common. you know, and in elementary school and,
Well, not everybody's parents were making wine because this is a Seventh Adventist community.
well, up here.
So, you know, up here in Angwin.
Angwin, you just recently allowed coffee sales, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a big deal.
That was a big deal.
Yeah, you fast forward now, this wine business has done a lot for the community, and I think the community embraces the wine business. But when we were growing up, I mean, we were heathens. I mean, we were, our mom smoked and we made wine. And I just remember, you know, going to school with some of the Adventist parents and just like not being the most popular family. You know, I mean, obviously there's wine producers up here, and that's who we're all friends with.
Who we were friends with.
But, you know, it was different times.
But we're talking another world, and it's almost like the subworld of another world. Here's Napa Valley, where wine is supposed to be just context.
Right.
And you were in this kind of an interesting enclave that was completely different mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's what you were surrounded by in your immediate. So
It's definitely, you know, it was upcoming, the wine business, but it was not embraced up here in Angwin.
that's so interesting.
In Angwin, it definitely wasn't, but, you know, the valley was definitely, you know, it was starting to kind of come back to life. You know, there was a thriving industry here before in the 1800s and, you know, pre-prohibition. And
Of course.
it got sleepy for a little while, and then, you know,
Yeah, it was a
60s and
huge setback.
70s really started coming back.
Yeah, and Hell Mountain, how exciting is it to grow grapes on Hell Mountain?
Yeah.
It's one of the most important AVAs, of course, but, you know, we're looking at soils this morning. They're just so rich looking. So even visually, you get a clue, even if you're not like a wine nerd.
Yeah.
So it's a
It's
very special place.
If you, the environment up here is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see a grapevine growing in it, you immediately think that works, that fits.
Yes.
And it does. It really does. I mean, we have such a unique situation up here, distinctive, different, you know, that I think is just producing incredible wines.
So the hallmark to me of the AVA is age-worthiness. If you're into wine at all, at some point you've come across Randy Dunn's wines, for example. We talked about that earlier. And they are huge. I was joking that they would outlive me, and it's not really such a joke. It's the truth.
It's probably true.
Yes. So that's saying a lot right there. The fact that this particular area can produce wines that are sometimes and oftentimes a delicious on release. You know, they have everything you want in a great bottle of wine, but then you can also lay it down, should you choose to, for decades.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really a magic soil up here. It really, you have so much complexity and minerality and structure that comes from growing conditions up here. But the wines aren't like super monstrous, big, you know, overpowering wines. There's this amazing balance and complexity and this ability to, like you said, lay it down or drink it now. It's just, and they continue to age and grow and develop, and they're really phenomenal.
absolutely. And the other, you know, salient point about Hell Mountain to me in wine sense is texture. And there's this silky, velvety quality to those wines. And it's almost counterintuitive because they are sizable, but they're also very elegant at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is that balance that everybody strives for in the wine world.
Yeah, you know, a lot of that, you know, if you want to get into the technical side of why some of these wines are as big and as rich as they are, is that we're warmer up here.
Oh.
So one of the aspects with Hell Mountain is that, you know, typically down in the valley floor we get a fog that comes in the summer.
Makes sense.
And keeps the valley cool. And that's one of the beautiful things about Napa Valley is that we have great hang time. We get this beautiful fog layer that comes in. But when that fog layer comes in, it pushes that warm inversion layer up to Hell Mountain. So we're typically above the fog, and our evenings up here, on average, I would say about 10 degrees warmer.
That's so interesting. So it allows the tannin structure to kind of elongate and...
So malic acid
Yeah.
is transpired in cold evenings.
Got it.
So typically our malate levels are higher, and in a fermentation, when you convert that malate acid to lactic acid,
which is
lactic is a
sweeter.
heavier, fatter, richer acid. Really contributes to that mouthfeel and that lushness that you were referring to before.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And The wines tend to have really long finishes as well. So to me, a wine should be a complete story. In the media world, we focus a lot in our tasting notes on the aromatics and, of course, the longevity and the length of the finish, which are super important. But there's also that middle part of that story and that texture, that mouthfeel that I think is
It's got
just
to be like a bell
spectacular.
curve. You know, when I'm tasting wines, I think of a bell curve. You know, you have an entry, and then how big and wide is that bell, and how high does that bell go, and then hopefully on the other side of the bell it is you can stretch it out for as long as you can.
I love that.
The longer the finish, the more you're going to remember. And you know, I always say that I've done my job from a winemaking standpoint. If you take a sip of wine, if you don't put that glass back down,
Ooh, I love that.
you have another sip.
Yes.
You want to have that another sip. It's fired something in your brain that you want to taste it again.
That's wonderful. So you guys obviously are gathering that we have a winemaker on our hands. You do all the work. You do all the vineyard work and cellar work.
No, I do some of the vineyard
Some of the
work.
vineyard
My
work.
dad still does the majority of the vineyard work.
That's Bob, right?
That's Bob.
That's fun.
Founder, 75 years old, still going strong. An amazing work ethic. The guy can fix anything, which is an incredible asset to us, because things are always breaking on a ranch. None of us want to fix those things, and Dad always jumps in and gets it done.
It's a true working ranch, by the way.
Oh, it is a working ranch.
Yeah.
We're completely family run and operated,
Yeah.
so we have no employees. My sister Heather does the sales and marketing and all the tastings. I'll jump in on tastings if she can't cover them.
Yep.
I do all the winemaking, and then Dad does the farming. So
this is like a quintessential almost poster child for Napa Valley. So if you guys are in Napa, if you want that authentic experience, this is it. It surrounds you. It's like Star Wars surrounds us and binds us, right? Like the energy. But truthfully, you feel so real here. It's, like I said, a working ranch. You guys are available. You actually do your own tastings, which is remarkable considering how busy you are. So this is quite an opportunity for somebody that really wants to know the authentic side of the valley.
Yeah, I think people really value the fact that they get to sit down with family members. But the other side of that too is it's valuable for us because we get to share what we do, and we love what we do. So why not be able to sit down and actually share it with, and it's an amazing reminder for us as well why we do it, because we get to share. They're all babies.
Of course.
Every vintage is a new, kid that we get to put out in the world and share with people and
introduce
and yeah, it's an interesting.
We've been referred to as deliberately rustic up here, and there's a lot of truth to that. But there's no facade. There's quite often there's beautiful wineries in this valley that are built up with Italian stone and what have you, but up here, the rocks that are surrounding these gardens are pulled from the field. This table that we're sitting at is an original redwood tank that held water on the property for God knows how long.
Well, it's an old redwood fermenter that came out of another facility that was abandoned up here in the 70s.
There's a sort of transference that happens when you're so close. You've touched this plant so many times. You've touched that barrel so many times. To me, the whole point of falling in love with wine is that it teaches you how to connect to yourself. It's a great facilitator. And people that create it in the first place are so intimately involved in it. And you are, again, this great example of all of that, because it's not done through third parties. It's not outsourced. And there's that magic. And yes, the wines are delicious, and we'll get into all of that later. But really, like I said, the most important thing is that experiential part. When, I can sit across the table from you and look in your eyes, and I know how much you've invested. And I know part of it is what I will taste eventually. Because there's so much goodwill here. It's just overflowing. And you can't help but be affected by that.
Right.
So it's you guys, it's well worth the trip. If you're in Napa, you got to show up here because I'm so impacted, and I come to the valley, I don't know, almost every day it feels like, but I still feel as if this is the first time, in the sense that it's such a strong connection that you experience. It's like nothing else.
Well, we enjoy spending time with people as well, but we also understand that connection that's built between us and our customers and soon-to-be friends and people that are going to enjoy our wines is what's going to carry us through.
Yeah.
You know, the bottling statement that our family put on the 1971 label was produced for the friends and family of Summit Lake Vineyards and Winery. And that's still on there, and it's true. It's really true.
No, and you live it. You are the living legacy. It's that intentionality. When somebody, like you described, your dad saw the potential of this abandoned place, but it was so beautiful that he obviously fell in love with it. And he transferred that love onto you, and I can see it. The way that you speak about it, the way that you relate to it. It's, to me, that is magic.
Well, it's funny, he calls it dumb luck. But, you know, I think that you now fast forward almost 50 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Which is crazy. Next year's 50 years.
50 years. He is so thankful to be up here.
Yeah.
And, I mean, his original intent was to get some of the valley floor, but now that he's been up here and he's seen the development that's happened down on the valley and the traffic, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful place, but nonetheless, it's a different world than it was in 1971.
Yeah.
He's just very thankful to be up here.
No, I can see that. Again, we keep coming back to this point that it's so close yet so far away. You feel like you're in your own world. And that's so special because the rest of the world tends to be chaotic and often unkind, and you feel kind of protected here almost.
Yeah, we definitely have our own little bubble up here.
Yes.
So, and it is, like you said, it's 20 to 30 minutes off of the valley floor.
It's
You know,
very
but
accessible, yeah.
It's an adventure.
It is.
But then we've also got, you know, all these amazing neighbors around us as well, so you can spend the whole day up here, or several
Absolutely.
days.
No, there's so much good wine here. And there's so much camaraderie too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing about the Valley that I always talk about is the fact that there's that sense of kinship, communal, information sharing. It's not competitive. You all make wine, but they're all different.
Right.
We all benefit from each other's successes and relationships and referrals, and you know, we've got friends that make great wine that, you know, if somebody needs another spot to go taste to fill their afternoon, we've got plenty of people that are right down the road or up the road that they can go and see and enjoy really, really nice wines.
Absolutely. No, I don't think that I've ever had a mediocre wine from Hell Mountain. I really can't think of one.
Very difficult to find a bad wine off of this hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing in and of itself.
Definitely.
So tell us about your winemaking a bit. I know you grew up watching your dad make wine, so you learned so much on the job, and you have some formal education pieces, but what I want to hear about the most is kind of your philosophy, your point of view.
Well, I think that, you know, winemaking, simply put, is just the culmination of a lot of little things that are done right. You know, there's obviously time spent in the vineyard. You know, we deal with good fruit, so that makes my job a lot easier. But not every vintage is a stellar vintage, so which is fine for me because there's some challenges every single year. You know, you're not cooking bread, you're actually making wine. There's no recipe that we're following. You know, those attentions to detail in the winery, I think, is where Heather refers to me as anal, but I like things clean. I like things done on time. I like things fresh.
My type A brother.
It's really important.
It's
Totally.
very
From a
It's very
winemaking, it's
important.
paramount from a winemaking
Yeah.
perspective. So I think that I focus on taking care of anything that is negative first. So if I have any wine that I'm not 100% happy with, how can I make it better? I'll pick lots in the vineyard, you know, separately, and we keep the lots separate in the winery.
It's
And
labor intensive, of course.
it's more rackings, it's more toppings, it's more breakdown material. Yeah, it's more money, essentially,
Yeah.
because it's more analysis we're running. But at the end of the day, if I can cull out what I don't think is good and let the cream rise to the top, if you will, and blend wines with stellar lots, it just is what we do, and it's fun. It's beautiful.
You definitely want a perfectionist in your winemaker, because that makes for a much better result. It sounds like.
And I'm never happy. Well, not to be a perfectionist, but and I think that's a fine thing. But I'm always I'm my own worst critic, and that's either here nor there. It's just my personality, right? I just want. I always find something that I think I could have done a little bit better on, but maybe that's why the wines are the way they are.
Yeah, talked about earlier about learning from your, from your own mistakes. And
One of the winemakers, in answer to my question of when are you finally happy with the blend, he's like, well, when my bottling truck is in the driveway, I have to be happy.
Right.
So it never, the work never really ends. Otherwise,
Right.
you'd still be blending. It sounds like you
Well,
might
we've
relate
got
to that.
we've got a bottling truck coming in 3 weeks. I've visited these blends probably 4 times now, and they're assembled. But I'm going to visit them again tomorrow, and again next week, and probably again the night before.
Oh, I bet.
Just
Probably
kind of
more.
reassuring
Yes.
myself, because once that wine's in the bottle, I mean, obviously you're
committed.
You're committed. It's a scary day because it's your last chance to make a mistake, and there's always something that goes wrong with bottling. But there's no such thing as a perfect bottling run. But yeah, I mean, once that cork's in the bottle, it's done.
So you mentioned vintage variants, which I think is an important subject to discuss. I think culturally we're kind of wedded to, we want the best. We want everything to be perfect, right? That's kind of not the point. Every vintage has its own unique characteristics. And that's the beauty of it. And embracing it, I think, is what makes for a great experience. 2011 was something we chatted about earlier that was an outlier for the Valley. But I would make an argument some of the best wines were made in that vintage. Heather referred to it as a winemaker's vintage, which I heartily agree with. How was 2011 for you?
I thought it was, it was a little bit of a challenge from a growing standpoint. The fruit came in; it wasn't as ripe as normal. Normally we bring fruit in, but you fast forward. Now we're drinking the wines, and they're absolutely beautiful. And I've done a couple comparative tastings with other Howell Mountain producers, 2011 vintage, and they did a good job as well. So yeah, like we said, every vintage is different. We can't think that every single vintage we're going to get this exorbitantly ripe fruit, and we can let it hang and get these nice ripe characteristics that producers seem to love. But it was a little bit less ripe. It was higher in acid. It's aging beautifully.
a lot of structure.
Lots of structure. So it turned out really well.
So if you guys are listening, there's a helpful tip in here for you. Look for 11s because the press didn't love the vintage, and there was all this negative characteristics assigned because it was a cooler vintage and had some weather events and such like that towards the end of the growing season and harvest. So they tend to be less expensive for that reason, and you will be so surprised how well rewarded you will be for seeking them out. And of course 12 was very loved, and for good reason. It was a fruit-forward, very generous vintage, and 13 was near perfect, and then 14 and 15s are fantastic as well. Just 15 drought year, so a bit hotter. And then of course the 16, and we have to talk about the 17 because it's an elephant in the room. A lot of consumers are wondering, the fire year as it's been labeled, and I think we need to kind of demystify it a bit and find out what is 2017 about on Howell Mountain, and for you specifically.
Well, so I'm going to start this by saying I don't think that there should be secrets in the wine business. I think as producers, we should understand that our consumers are educated. Sometimes as press, things can be exaggerated.
Oh yeah.
And, we'll just deal with that. 2017, there were some fires. And, everybody's concern obviously is smoke taint.
Yep.
We had, I think it was the most polluted air in the world for 12 days up here. It was atrocious.
In the Bay Area, entire Bay Area.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we did pick our fruit, and there were some smoke taint issues with the fruit. The levels were low.
Okay.
But with smoke taint, the 4-ethylguanidol levels typically below 3 to 4 parts per million, I believe, are detectable by most people, and that's right where our levels were. And I made the fruit. I managed our fermentations differently, so I kept our skin contact and fermentations. I basically shortened our fermentations, so the skin to juice contact time was less. So I'm basically hopefully not extracting any more of that smoke taint. And then, once your fermentation is complete, those levels are basically either free or they're bound. And there's actually processes now that remove it.
Yeah.
And I took a portion of the wine and I had it filtered and removed those levels and then put it back into the main lot. And now the wine's beautiful. I have no qualms with the 17. I think it's going to be a really, really nice vintage. I'm bottling it in 3 weeks. I'm very happy with it.
I tasted a bunch at the Premier Napa Valley, which is, of course, a kind of a trade showcase. There's a lot of examples of 16s and 17s, and 17s were showing so well. And another tidbit that you guys might be interested in, I heard that it's virtually indiscernible, the difference between slight smoke taint and a heavily toasted barrel.
It's the same compound. Right. So you have to run your analysis prior to barreling down, because once you're in barrel, that analysis is going to be skewed by the toasted wood.
Yeah.
Those compounds, that's toasted wood. It's just like a fire, right? It's the same thing. So what are you measuring once you're in barrel? So you have to be very careful with that. So we had all those baseline numbers, and even prior going to barrel, it was so faint that it didn't concern me. It's, again, every year is different. Unfortunately, these are, normally deal with weather challenges, maybe a little bit of insect pressure, but this is kind of a new frontier when it comes to fires, California, and those challenges that were posed. But 2017, I'm confident will be received very well.
So as a consumer, you just gave me a lot of confidence. When Mr. Perfectionist says I'm not concerned, my ears pop up. It's like, that's all I need to know.
Right.
And so you guys, whatever you do, don't listen to the alarmist about 2017.
Don't pass on a vintage.
Stop it.
Trust your palate.
Yeah.
And try it.
Yeah.
And I can damn near guarantee you're not going to be picking any of it up. You'll get beautiful wood and oak attributes, but none of the smoke, quote unquote, taint issues.
So if you're a critical thinker, if you think for yourself, you'll be well rewarded, because those that don't will maybe pass on it, and there'll be again bargains just like in 2011. So there's a buying opportunity there.
For sure.
Your vineyards are absolutely magnificent. They're asleep right now, but beautiful nevertheless.
They're waking up.
Yes. Some old vines. Some of the vines on your property are how old? The oldest blocks?
Well, the oldest block is the block that my dad planted in 1973. And that's our base
Still
blend
in
for our
existence,
cab
yeah.
every year. Yeah.
So how long is it going to stick around, do you think, in your estimates?
Oh,
if there's such
I don't.
thing.
You know,
a terrible
it's funny.
question,
That's
but-
one of those. Well, it's not. It's the family. It's the ongoing debate.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you just walked through the vineyards with us, and it's kind of hard to look at a block of vines that are, big, tangled old vines that produce very little fruit.
Exactly.
But the
it's
fruit's
yields.
beautiful and it's magnificent, but it's
Yeah.
low yields.
Yeah,
So it's
gotta be hard.
one of those. It's like, do you take them out? Do you leave them?
But the emotional attachment. I mean, I just met the vine and I was
it's
already
kind of
petting
ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the oldest block, and then we've got 2 acres that were planted in the mid '70s of Zinfandel
it. Yeah.
that came from the budwood that was originally planted, the pre-prohibitions in
Yeah. And
vines that
Georgia
were here on the
stock, yeah.
property. Hmm.
Yeah, that's really special.
Yeah.
And then you replanted some of the pieces, right?
Yeah, so originally we had the pre-prohibitions in vines that were planted. So that was the first 2 years my folks took to clean everything out.
Sure.
73 we planted that acre of Cabernet. And then it took them about 8 to 10 years to plant the rest of the property to Zin using the budwood from the old vines. And then late 80s, early 90s, we had some phylloxera that went through the vineyard, like most people in the valley.
course.
And everything that we'd put in on French rootstock clones needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
And that process took us, another 8 to 10 years because we didn't want to pull everything at the same time.
Of course.
One, we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And phlox is a very slow-moving insect in the soil.
I have such a terrible visual. I went to a museum of phylloxera in Spain. That was a
Yeah.
big mistake because now they have this giant bug that's like now in my brain every time. So
Oh,
just
right.
phylloxera. I can actually see that huge sculpture.
Yeah, which is it's not what it is. It's this little tiny microscopic bug that
Yes.
eats the roots.
So
But,
destructive.
yeah, so I mean, we have a very mixed age group on the property. We have the stuff that was planted in 73, and we've got some babies that were just budded over a couple years ago. So
So for those that don't know, for vineyard to come into production is 4 to 5 years, right?
up here on Hell Mountain, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
typically
So that's
5 up here on High
Typically
Mountain.
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So economically speaking, not a great proposition. And when the vineyard is young, of course, just like a young person, you need to mature, you need to get to know what it's producing. So it's a learning curve, right?
It is.
So it's definitely patience.
I think it's important for people to realize, though, that replanting is a good thing in the sense that, yes, it's very expensive, but you're putting clean plant material on the ground.
Yeah.
So less virus, less susceptibility to rootstock and leaf roll and all of these other problems that we can potentially deal with up here. And hopefully better fruit.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's expensive, like I said, but at the end of the day, hopefully you're getting better fruit out of these vines because they're cleaner plant. It's cleaner plant material.
So we're mostly in a red wine country, right? I mean, Cab really loves it here. And Petit Syrah and Zinfandel, of course, like you described. You make 5 wines?
We make 6 on
6 wines.
occasion.
Okay.
Yeah, so our Zinfandel, we've kind of stuck to our guns because that was what's originally planted on the property and
Great.
the varietal that my dad fell in love with.
Yes.
So our largest production is still actually going into our Zin. And then we do 200 to 300 cases of Cabernet.
Very nice. That acre.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then we've got just about a half an acre of Petit Syrah. So we're doing a Petit Syrah label.
I bet you it's
then
intense. I can't wait to try
It's
it.
amazing. A little bit of Zinfandel port. On the years we can get our vines to hang on long enough to produce it. And then we do our rosé, which is a blend of Zin and Cab. So we started that one in 2006, I think was our first vintage.
Oh.
And all of the wines outside of our Zin are named for my parents' granddaughters.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So they ended up with 4 granddaughters. I had my 2 girls, and then both my brothers had daughters first. And then they both had sons second.
Interesting.
So the boys are now old enough to realize that they didn't have a wine named for them.
Uh-oh.
So we actually, 2014, we did a boys blend. for the boys.
That's great.
So, and we just redid that blend, kind of modified the grapes that went into it, but that's our...
This is the original label, so it's a retro label, if you will.
And clean looking.
we did a throwback label for the boys
I love that.
blend.
Yeah.
So a little homage to my dad and to the boys on the property.
It's a blend of the Cabernet Zinfandel and the Petit Syrah that we grew up here.
I love that continuity, and you definitely want to get them attached as much as possible because this is a family affair. This is going to.
We're sucking all the kids back in.
Smart, good strategy.
Well, they're starting to need a little money after school and asking for work, so they'll come up here and do a little bit of work, just like we did when we were growing up. Although we did way more work than they're doing now. But
it's one of the saddest things that I run across occasionally when the family legacy stops with the next generation, because for whatever reason, it's so important to preserve this. And it sounds like in your case, it's going to keep going.
That's exactly our intent. Our succession planning is in motion.
Yeah.
We actually have a brother, Danny, he works in St. Helena, but he's involved up here as well.
Sure.
So how do you take a piece of property that was purchased for nothing back in 1971, and obviously land values up here in Howell Mountain have increased exorbitantly over the 50 years that Dad's been here, and pass it to the next generation?
That's a dilemma for sure, financially speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 1% of family farms, literally across this country, go to the next generation. So that's what we're working on as a family, is building a business that can sustain that for the next generation. So,
and it's so important. Family-owned businesses in general. That's the backbone of this country, and agriculture in particular. I mean, I know that there's a lot of romance surrounding wine and such like that, and there's really not enough awareness of the fact that this is agriculture first, and the viticulture second.
Farming first.
Yes. And we all benefit from that, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So it's super important that it gets preserved and passed on.
Yeah, I think one point I'd like to make, though, is that the lifestyle that we live up here, it's a beautiful place. It is a lot of work, but when it comes to those important aspects of passing it on to the next generation, taking care of your land, being able to have the time to spend with family and friends, and spending time in your garden, raising your own animals, showing your children what an hour in the vineyard is, right?
Yeah.
If you want to work here's $10 an hour. I'll show you what an hour is. It's a long hour for a 12-year-old kid.
Yep.
Without your phone in your hand.
Yeah, without your phone in your hand. I mean, all those values are
so
important.
No, I think they're actually life-saving. From the philosophical standpoint, we were talking a little bit off mic about where kind of this next generation is going because of all the devices and AI and all the temptations. And unfortunately, what falls short is empathy. And that is what defines us as humans. Otherwise, that's sociopath territory. We don't want to go there.
Right.
This teaches you how to be, the best human you can be. And to my taste, there's never enough of it, but certainly the fact that your children are growing up just like you have, seeing firsthand what hard work is, what it's like to, touch another life,
And the importance of giving back. I mean, Heather gives back, an amazing amount with 4-H and everything else that she does.
It keeps me sane.
Yeah.
It's the balance.
That's, Napa Valley, again, has so many faces and so many misconceptions about it. Yes, there's a lot of wealth. Yes, it's beautiful. But my version of Napa is all about the heart and giving back.
What's amazing, we live in a very genuine and generous community. People understand that it's farming first, and you have to do that with other people. You support each other and you communicate, and it's a generous. Everybody takes care of other people up here. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about where we live. You
Yeah.
know, whether it's our neighbor across the street or the neighbor, you know, down the road in Napa.
Yeah.
You know, you can call anybody if you need anything, and they're there in 10 minutes. You know, it's
That's quite something.
It's an amazing community that we live in.
The world got to see a glimpse of it, during the fires. You know, there's so many stories. I mean, yes, it's a devastating event, of course, but there's so many heartwarming stories that came out of it, and a lot of it is what you're describing: neighbors helping neighbors, putting
Right.
other people first
Right.
before themselves, and that type of stuff is, you know, what makes you hopeful about our future as humanity. You certainly hear a lot about the other stuff and how we basically making sure we're going to get extinct. We get in our own way so well trained at that. But it's the other way that shows up when you least expect it, and when the most dramatic things happen.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, people find out what they're made of, what their neighbors are made of, and it's a very hopeful message to me.
Mm-hmm.
So your guys' job is to come here and to see for yourselves. I promise it will make you feel better about the world and yourself. Thank you so much, and I cannot wait to taste the wine. So we're not quite finished yet. That's our
okay.
next agenda.
Yep.
Meanwhile, I just want to thank you for really showing me your world and opening your hearts and being so transparent.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming up.
Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure featuring Ilona Thompson. We'll see you again next week.